Hey there, it's Joe Simons. We just had another awesome podcast interview, this time with the Land Captain himself, the original Land Captain, Captain Steve Kantner. This is the guy that wrote the book on fishing Florida on foot, and we're actually going to be filming with him next week. I'm rigging up here a little bit right now. We're going to be heading out there doing all kinds of beach fishing, surf fishing, whatever you want to call it, going after pompano, snook, bluefish, and even some sharks. We're going to have a lot of fun, and we just really want to have him on to talk about just more stories than anything else. We didn't want to have it like any how-to stuff because we're going to literally be filming like 100 videos with him over the next 4 days. But we want to have him on, just tell some stories, so enjoy it. Enjoy Steve. This guy has literally kind of done it all. He's the guy that all the legends go to when they want to catch really awesome fish on foot. So enjoy this podcast. Hello, Salt Strong and Fish Strong Nation. Another episode of the Fish Strong podcast with the Salt Strong brothers. I'm Joe Simons.
And this is Luke Simons.
And this is going to be an awesome one. I've been following this gentleman for quite some time, Steve Kantner. And if you're watching us on YouTube, I'm holding up the book. You know how people talk about, oh yeah, that guy wrote the book on something? Well, this guy literally wrote the book on fishing South Florida on foot. And I know he's got a couple other books he's working on right now we'll talk about, but not just an author, an amazing fisherman. I mean, he's been doing this for, I think, longer than you and I have been on this earth, Luke. Has a ton of knowledge, some amazing stories, and we're going to dig into some pretty cool tips and tactics on surf fishing. And Steve, are you there?
Oh, I sure am. Yeah, don't tell them how old I am or somebody's going to start sending me crutches. No, I have. And you and I had a little preliminary conversation before this started, but I'm 70 years old, and I moved to Florida when I believe I was 6 or 7, and it was shortly thereafter that one of my pals' dads took a couple of us to this dark, dingy old fishing pier in the dead of night, and I'm out there. This is back when there were fireflies and stuff like that, and, everything was clean, and there was nobody on the beach and stuff, and a couple of these big boys who I later got to know when I got older, guys that were 10 years older than me, they reeled up and released an extremely large nurse shark. And I mean, to me, it could have been Namu, the killer whale. It was the neatest thing I ever saw. They beached it. These guys had a rod that they'd made out of a lemonwood shovel handle. And in fact, I got to know these guys. And I was a poor kid, and that's probably like them. That's how this do-it-yourself and fishing on land and everything else. I mean, maybe had I made some better choices in life, I'd have had 4 of these Verados in the back of my transom or something like that. But I did have a couple of boats, and I actually did pretty well offshore. But there's, as far as I'm concerned, particularly in my old age, where I kind of sit back and I really savor fishing. I love this surf stuff. I mean, I love it.
And we talked about this offline, that surf fishing and fishing from the beach, especially once you get in the water, it's not just like poor man's fishing. I mean, you're doing it because you love it. And talk about just that aspect of kind of being one with nature, and like why this is so special to you, and why really everyone should at least try it.
Yeah, well, exactly. And the thing with me, we were just talking about, is most of the places where I fish are places that have a different attitude towards beach development, and they've structured their tax base and such that they don't have a bunch of beachfront condos, or if anything, they have real expensive beachfront real estate that, frankly, the law allows you to get as long as you stay below the low water mark. And starting in Palm Beach County and working north through Martin and St. Lucie County, there are plenty of places where you can walk. If you're willing to do it, you can trudge a mile or two and not see another person down there. And then sometimes these people will walk out of these houses and strike up a conversation with you. And they're, of course, very interesting, oftentimes kind of famous types or whatever. But I think the thing that moves me the most about the surf fishing, and we were teasing about the shark fishing angle, is it's between you and the fish. And the surf is not just a shallow water kind of reflection about what you have in deep water. There are specific species who run, I don't want to use that ragged edge term, but who run that little silver ribbon between where the land and the water meet, which is intrinsic. I mean, it is we call it the littoral zone or whatever, where well, everything evolved from the sea, and here's where it crawled up on the land. And there are specific species, there are specific movements and times of year that I'm going to tell you about. But when you're down there and you're 2 miles away from nowhere, like I say, and you got a 150-pound spinner shark and a big spinning reel, and he's got 350 yards of 50-pound braid out there. I remember I had somebody walk up to me, and, we don't think of this anymore. The tackle is so evolved, like Ernest Hemingway said, there's no way the fish can win. And I'll tell you, and like I said, I just had my annual physical this morning, but a lot of years I used to say that was my stress test. And you're out there, and this thing's been out there for 30 minutes, and now you got him almost all the way back, and you're gasping, your feet are in this wet sand. And I had this little girl who was walking down the beach walk up to me and said, who do you call if you pass out? Who do I call if you pass out? And I said, the coroner. But it's really where you get to kind of reconnect with yourself at the place that is the origin of life as we know it, where the waters and the earth meet. You smell, it's particularly on these beaches further north where you have clean Gulf Stream water coming a lot closer. You smell the iodine, the fresh northeasters in your face. You're not smelling car exhausts or anything else. You see strange stuff on the beach, sometimes black swans, bobcats, all kinds of stuff. And, the people are, when you do see people, they're there for the same reason you are, even if they're not fishing. They really tap into this vibrancy, this energy in nature. And, in a day and time when people are thinking about eating better diets, fish certainly figures heavily into this. And if you follow the seasons and you know what you're doing and you're using sporting tackle, even catching, like eating fish, mackerel, bluefish, pompano, and whiting and stuff is not only exciting, but it provides, kind of an alternative source of dinner. And I could eat fish 7 days a week, but that's just me, and I'm probably an oddball. You want me to tell you about what we look for right now?
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
it's March right now. So yeah, let's talk about what species, what kind of baits or lures, everything that you're looking for right now, and in particular, because Saltstrong, you followed us for a while. We hammer home the importance of just getting that right spot, especially if you're on the beach. It's not easy just to walk a mile or two down the beach, trekking all your gear. So I'd love to talk about. Yep.
Yeah. As far as spots, here's something. First of all, there's fish that we would call demersal that stay there all the time. We have fish that are migratory. And generally in our winters down here, and particularly in the surf, the migratory species like, we got jacks and blue runners and stuff, but I'm talking about ones of some significance to anglers, like bluefish. A lot of people still eat them. Mackerel, Spanish mackerel, pompano. What generally happens in the fall when the northeasters start blowing, usually in late August, is that you have a gradual cooling trend in waters up off of, I'm going to say, the Virginia Capes and even further north. And even if it isn't icy cold up there, or certainly not down here, the earth starts to kind of tilt on its axis, and the periods of sunlight are less and everything. And North America, the Atlantic coast of North America reacts by, you start seeing more of these high pressure things and storms coming and winds blowing out of the northeast. Now, when that blows down the beach, we always used to have a saying that the sea is 15 points off the wind. But stated simply, if you've got a wind that's north-northeast, that current's booking south. Now, these migratory species, which of course provide food for larger game fish as well. I mean, these big kings and big tarpon are in there. And then, of course, you've got your bait fish runs like mullet and stuff. They might be moving. Those mackerel will swim 8-9 miles an hour going south. And they swim with the current. Then as the current lets up, they turn and they feed into it. And most of these mackerel, bluefish, pompano type fish that we encounter, that we fish for, traditionally with a small wobbling spoon, a 5/8 ounce crocodile, or a cast master on the beach with a 7-foot spinning rod. And frankly, I have a reason for it that I will either explain now or in the video presentations. I catch more fish, even though I'm a big braid guy. I like mono for that. But what happens is these fish continue to pour down here through September, October, November, where you have this, well, it's not as massive as it used to be, but this extensive migration of bait fish, everything from hogmouth fry, anchovies, glass minnows, whatever you want to call them, to little red minnows, to baby pilchers, to big pilchers, to green herring, or what do we call them, thread herrings, greenies, mullets, it's just all kinds of stuff starts moving south in these big clots. And there's usually a swell, and the water's dirty and stirred up. And a lot of times certain fish that love the cleaner water, like mackerel, will actually, and you can see them skyrocketing by the millions, will be like just outside the end of the pier coming by, or just at the end of the pier. Finally, you get to December, where things kind of level off. Now, at least until recently, that's when you started getting, well, like I used to say, we always had a couple of 40-degree days in November. Now, this year is the first time in a long time that we've actually had that we actually have some temperature. And when that starts, these fish start settling in. And let's say you have a school, I mean, if you can put a number on it, let's say you have 1,000 8-pound bluefish that were booking south off Hope Sound Beach, and all of a sudden the water starts to clear. What they'll do a lot of times, because they're vulnerable, they're as big as they are, they're a school fish, they'll back off into slightly deeper water, maybe 20 feet of water, and wait for nightfall. And there's a couple of places I know where houses on the beach up there, big exclusive houses, have these floodlights that go out over the water. And these bluefish will actually work their way into the surf there. And I mean, you've got to have the owner's permission to go out there and fish there. There's like 2 guys I know that do that, but they'll be here. And all along, it's like an accordion, all through the fall and into the winter and into February or whatever, stuff keeps heading south. It's like traffic driving into Atlanta, rush hour or whatever. And then all of a sudden, and we used to, here in Fort Lauderdale, we used to say it started in earnest on St. Patty's Day, but this year we've had some pretty substantial, cool southeast winds where all of a sudden the current, the longshore current, reverses, and now it's heading north. And it's picking up bunches of these fish, and they're running down our surf ahead of the warmer water. And these bait fish schools are starting to arrive from the Keys or the, who knows, I mean, coming around from the Gulf or whatever. And these fish are starting to chase them. Now, usually by the middle of March, you've got big jacks that are coming into that Palm Beach, Jupiter area. And I mean, when I say big, one school might be 10-pounders, the next school might be 35-pounders. And we sure encounter them in the surf. And we fish for them. We use that same big plug. It's modified. It weighs about 6 ounces. It's a surface plug. And there we're using a 9 or 10-foot big, spin rod with a reel that's capable of holding, there I use the braid. You want something that's got, at least 300 yards of 30 or 40-pound braid on it. These big jacks are dynamic. Also, while this migration is starting to head north, these spinner sharks that I started fishing for in my old age are running down from all points north, I guess the Hatteras Capes and everything, and they start convening off the coast of Palm Beach, particularly, this annual spawning migration. and they'll be doing their thing and everything else, and all of a sudden at dark, you'll see them falling down these crystal clear waves like these Waimea style swells, and here they come by. Here's 10, here's 20, and they'll get in the surf, and it is absolutely psychotic. I mean, it's like you got to have a nitroglycerin pill and stick it under your tongue. And I've had it before where it was so bad, where they absolutely cleaned out everything I had. It was so bad where I'd have one hooked on the plug screaming and jumping, and two tail wrapped in the line at the same time. And of course, these things, shark skin is rough to the touch like sandpaper. And anyway, to make a long story short, they'd get off. But at this time, the mackerel, bluefish, and pompano that work their way south start working their way north, because with the southeast wind and the warming water, cleaner water, the southeast doesn't muddy the water up like the north winds do in the fall. But with the southeast wind, the current is now running north. And depending on where the water temperatures remain, this is how long it takes them to clear our area. Now, as far as spots, when you're talking about bait fish, which ultimately is what draws these, or crustaceans, in the case of pompano or whiting or whatever, you look for areas that are favorable for this. March used to signal the arrival of the first big pilchers, or I think on the West Coast you guys call them LYs or whatever, and you'd have one small school around the piers, but you get them in the surf too, and normally what they do is they'll hole up. There's certain areas, and they're not necessarily distinguishable. We learn them by trial and error. There'll be some patch reefs out 1,000 feet from shore or whatever, but on a rising tide, particularly in the late afternoon, these bait fish will start pushing closer to shore, and in with them, I mean, there'll be snook, or there'll be this, or some bluefish, or some big mackerel, and other stuff. Just, it's like everything shows up at once. But I was a kid. I'd never get this. I'd be fishing on Lake Worth Pier, and I mean, I'm a college student or whatever, and somebody'd have a balloon bait out there, a goggle eye out there, 500 yards on a balloon, literally, and all of a sudden it'd be nothing all morning. And the reel would start going off, and the guy'd set up, and he'd have a sailfish. They did land 130 or 120 some sailfish on that pier, and I can speak to that with some personal authority. At the same time that was happening, here comes a hammerhead shark up the side that had been swimming up the surf. Hadn't been anything all day. And what does he know about this other thing that was 500 yards out? There's just like this resonance that goes through the water, this bonefish whisperer kind of thing. And at the same time this is happening, now this is the currents coming to you from the south. On the north side, you take a look over here, and here's one of these great big cow patties, one of these huge stingrays, like 800 pounds or something, just barely moving along the bottom. And just like a great big, B-17 bomber, here you look on the surface and doing these slow circles with a fighter escort, and there'll be, like 20 cobias up to 50 pounds or whatever. And I was, as a kid, people, they looked down at cobia. They thought they were akin to sharks, but I knew better. And I still have these big mirror lures that I used to cast to them, and I mean, we used to lambaste them. And sometimes the cobias will follow shark. I used to have a deal. You want me to tell you a kind of a cute story? I think you get a laugh. Your people will.
We love stories.
When I was a college, we used to hang around Deerfield Pier. Now I don't know. It's a Deerfield International Pier. I don't know what all that is now. It's. I mean, I don't know how to get. I went up there and did something for the IGFA once with kids, but it's like a circus to get out there. But in the old days, we knew the guy had worked in the shop, Jimmy, and we'd go out there when it was bitter cold. Back then, in the 1960s and stuff, we used to get cold winters. I mean, it'd be 38 degrees and stuff, and the wind is howling out of the west. And we all had, by that time, we had jobs. We had enough money to buy like a 12-0 reel with, hell, the line that went on there was $100 back then. And we're using these big balloons, and we go by the docks, and we knew the captains, and we'd get bonitas and stuff, and we'd have a half a bonita with 2 hooks, balloon broken off and everything. And, the thing starts clicking out, and somebody's got a big shark on. And a lot of times it'd be one of these dusky sharks. And, I mean, big one, like 400, 450 pounds. And we get them up in the lights. Now, it's freezing cold. There's nobody on the beach, nobody on the pier. It's 11 o'clock at night. Of course, we were probably a little less moderate. We were college kids, drinking beers and stuff. But Jimmy Weiss, you'd see him and you'd have cobias, and Jimmy Weiss would lock the pier up. And they used to have the squid we used to get, it was called Monterey squid. They'd throw a box of frozen squid in the shrimp tank. They'd thaw out real quick, and we'd go running out in the pier. And we'd take turns holding the 12-0 with the 10.5 foot, 11-foot dusky shark with a cobia swim around it. And we'd have 40 or 50 pound tests, just a bare hook with a squid and drop it down there and jig it. And wrench his head out of the water and pull him, and somebody'd have a gaff, and 2 or 3 of these big brawly guys bring these big cobias flipping and kicking over the railing. And when we got a bunch of them, the one kid that owned the surf shop right down the street, this is hysterical. Somebody had enough money to buy a 160-quart cooler, and we'd all take a cobia and drag it out in the parking lot. Now, it's freezing. I mean, we're just frozen cold at 11 o'clock at night. And we'd load these cobias in there. Now, the first place that really did a lot of business on cobia was Hillsborough Inlet. And there were a couple of boats, and we got to know these guys and really revere these captains who were great cobia fishermen. But we needed a little pier money and stuff. But we'd go. The one kid that owned the surf shop had a set of whites. He had a white uniform. And we knew that the morning trip, they'd fish sailfish out in the Gulf Stream going north. Then they'd run up on the beach, and they'd run back to Hillsborough Inlet from like up in Boynton or whatever. And every time they'd see a ray, they'd catch cobias. And they had a regular clientele that used to park in the parking lot and stuff. And we'd arrive about 20 minutes before these charter boats would come around the corner at Hillsborough Lights. And here we had this great big cooler in the back of a truck and everything. And listen, we didn't have any or whatever, but we've got some here. And and you know what I mean? It was $4 a pound or whatever. And we're filleting the cobias, which are ice cold. We had ice on them and everything. And weighing them in their scales and stuff like that, and selling the cobias. I remember telling one of those captains about that years later. They were laughing so hard they were crying. Yeah. And I mean, it wasn't so much that, or we did it that often that they lost out a bunch of business. But that's the kind of stuff we did. And I've always had a real sense of inshore fishing, and I've always liked that.
That's great.
Yeah, I love cobia. So that's.
Hey, incidentally, excuse me, March and April is cobia time, and ironically, it seems throughout the southern part of their range. It's not like, they start in the Keys and then they're up here. And pardon me, I still have a little touch of the flu here. But anyway, it's like everywhere from here to Hatteras, the time to catch cobia is the month of April. And we get them on the pier, and now, of course, we didn't know back then, and now a little more realistic limits and stuff like that, hopefully bringing the fish back. We didn't, who knew? I mean, we used to kill sailfish and stuff like that. It's only, I think, when it stings you, when you start to see the loss of the resource and you get a little bit older and you think about the things you didn't have, that you start appreciating the things that you do. And that's one thing you find in the surf. I go out there and catch a dozen mackerel. Well, first of all, I'm going to let a lot of them go. Or unless I know I have somebody that lives next door to me who really likes fish, who, or with a family or something like that. But it's, I think most beach fishermen are pretty they're pretty good about that. They take what they can use, and that's it. And yep. There is, with the Pompano, a considerable contingent who have purchased a license and who do fish for them commercially with a hook and line.
Yep. So when you're fishing, and like we're going to be going fishing with you here really soon to film a whole course about surf beach fishing. Are you primarily using lures? And I know you make some homemade lures and jigs. Or are you using cut bait, live bait, shrimp? What are you using? Sand fleas?
Okay, that's a good question. Here's how I would answer that. It depends what level of involvement I want and how much stuff I'm willing to pack down. And you talked about specific spots. Because of the migratory nature of things, there are certain places, if I want to bring the whole kit and caboodle, bait, lures, and the whole deal, which I'm going to do here, I'm going to have I have a specialized, customized beach cart with the big balloon tires and so on and so forth. And we'll have every option available because nowadays you can't be a one-trick pony. You got to have it all. But at the same time, I might have 3 or 4 surf rods, and I don't mean that they have to be 14-footers, but if I'm going to stop and bait fish, let's say for pompano or whatever, I want a rod that's